Sarah, honey, I just need 5,000 this time. The cancer treatments are destroying me financially. I watched my Aunt Margaret dab her eyes with a tissue that stayed completely dry. 34 years old, and I'd never noticed how perfectly she could fake tears until this moment in my kitchen. My name is Sarah Chen, marketing director, single mom to twin 8-year-olds, and apparently the family ATM that everyone thinks runs on stupidity instead of actual money. Margaret sat across from me at my dining table, her Chanel purse strategically placed next to a stack of what looked like medical bills. The same aunt who'd raised me after mom died when I was 16. The same aunt who taught me how to balance a checkbook and told me never to lend money I couldn't afford to lose. The same aunt who used to check my homework every night and made sure I understood that family meant everything. Now she was performing grief in my kitchen like she was auditioning for a movie role. Aunt Maggie, you just paid off that loan from Christmas. I kept my voice level, but something cold was settling in my chest. The 4,000 for your emergency dental work. Oh, sweetheart. She pressed the tissue to her cheek again, and I caught the exact moment she remembered to make her voice tremble. This is different. The oncologist says I need this new treatment that insurance won't cover. You know how these doctors are, they want everything up front. I studied her face. Margaret had always been beautiful, sharp cheekbones, silver hair she kept perfectly styled, clothes that whispered expensive even when she claimed poverty, designer scarves that cost more than my grocery budget, shoes that probably cost more than my car payment. But right now, watching her perform grief, I felt something shift inside me. Like a camera lens focusing for the first time. Which oncologist? Dr. At City Medical. She didn't hesitate, which impressed me. A prepared liar was always more dangerous than a sloppy one. The tall one with the beard who treated your mother. I nodded, making a mental note. Dr. Patterson was our family physician. He treated colds and high blood pressure, not cancer. He'd also been the one to tell me mom's cancer was terminal, sitting in that tiny office with the motivational posters that felt like cruel jokes. But I didn't correct Margaret. Instead, I got up and walked to my laptop on the kitchen counter. What are you doing, honey? Just checking something. I pulled up my online banking and turned the screen so she could see it. Look, I want to help you. I always do. But between your loans and mom's medical debt that I'm still paying off, plus the kids' expenses, Margaret's eyes locked onto my account balance like a hawk spotting prey. I watched her face carefully, and for just a second, maybe half a second, I saw something that wasn't grief, something calculating, something that measured numbers and possibilities. Sarah, I would never ask if it wasn't life or death. Her voice caught perfectly on life or death, like she'd practiced it. You know what cancer did to your mother? I can't go through that. I won't. It was again. That tissue dabbing at completely dry eyes. The reference to mom was a nice touch. Margaret had always known exactly which buttons to push. Let me think about it overnight. This is a big amount. I need to look at my budget. Her face changed. Just slightly, but I caught it. A flash of irritation before the mask slipped back on, like an actor dropping character between takes. Of course, sweetheart. I understand. She gathered her purse and those medical bills with practiced efficiency. I'll call you tomorrow. And Sarah? Thank you for even considering it. You're the only family I have left. After she left, I sat in my kitchen staring at the chair she'd occupied. The same chair where she'd sat 3 months ago asking for Christmas money for her grandchildren. Grandchildren I'd never met and was starting to doubt existed. The same chair where she'd cried, really cried, when she told me about losing her job last year. The same chair where she'd held me when I was 17 and terrified about college applications, promising me that everything would work out because we had each other. Except now I was wondering, had any of it been real? I picked up my phone and called City Medical. Hi, this is Sarah Chen calling about my Aunt Margaret Lawson. I'm her emergency contact and wanted to confirm her appointment schedule with Dr. Patterson. The receptionist's voice was cheerful and helpful. I'm sorry, but Dr. Patterson doesn't see oncology patients. You might be thinking of Dr. Peterson at the cancer center downtown? My stomach dropped. Oh, my mistake. Could you check if she has any appointments at all with Dr. Patterson? Any routine visits? A pause while she clicked through screens. I'm not showing any Margaret Lawson in our system at all. I hung up and walked to my window, watching Margaret's car disappear down the street. The same silver Mercedes she'd had for 5 years. The same Mercedes she'd claimed was falling apart when she asked for that dental work money. The same Mercedes that looked freshly detailed and had new tires the last time I'd seen it. My phone buzzed. A text from my neighbor, Julia. "Your aunt's here a lot lately. Everything okay?" I frowned. Margaret lived 40 minutes away in what she claimed was a rundown apartment complex. When had Julia seen her here? "What do you mean?" "She was here Tuesday morning. And last Friday. Thought maybe she was helping with the kids or something. She had a key." Tuesday morning. Last Friday. Days when I was at work and the kids were at school. Days when my house was completely empty. And she had a key I'd given her years ago for emergencies, back when I trusted her with everything. I walked through my living room slowly, looking at everything with different eyes. My jewelry box on the dresser, was it in the same position? The loose floorboard near my bedroom closet that I'd been meaning to fix, did it seem more loose than usual? The stack of mail on my coffee table, had I left it that neat? My hands were shaking as I called my office voicemail. Sometimes people left messages on my work line when they couldn't reach my cell, and I'd been in back-to-back meetings this week. 3 messages. The first was a client confirming next week's campaign presentation. The second was my dentist's office reminding me about my cleaning. The third made my blood stop moving. "Hi Sarah, this is Linda from First National Bank. Your Aunt Margaret called asking about accessing your safe deposit box. She had some questions about the paperwork requirements and wanted to know if she was listed as an authorized user. Could you give me a call back when you get a chance? Thanks." I played the message 3 times. Margaret didn't even know I had a safe deposit box. We'd never discussed it. The only people who knew were my lawyer and my financial advisor. The only reason she'd call the bank about it was if she'd somehow gotten hold of documents that mentioned it. Documents that were locked in my bedroom filing cabinet. I ran upstairs 2 steps at a time and checked the cabinet. Everything looked normal, but when I pulled out my bank statements, one was upside down. I never filed anything upside down. Years of working in marketing had made me obsessively organized. My heart was hammering as I started going through the papers more carefully. Credit card statements, insurance documents, investment account summaries. Everything was there, but some pages had been photographed. I could tell because there were slight wrinkles and one had a tiny tear that hadn't been there before. Someone had handled these documents, examined them, documented them. I sank onto my bed, staring at the evidence in my hands. My aunt, the woman who'd taken me in, who'd paid for my college, who I'd trusted with everything, had been in my house. In my bedroom. Going through my private financial information like a detective building a case. The woman who'd been crying about cancer and borrowing money from me wasn't broke. She was researching me. The first time Margaret asked me for money, I was 26 and stupid with gratitude. I'd just gotten my first real promotion at the marketing firm, and she'd driven 3 hours to take me to dinner at the nicest restaurant in the city. We sat in that overpriced steakhouse with the white tablecloths and crystal glasses, and she told me how proud she was. How Mom would have been proud. How I'd exceeded every expectation she'd had when she'd taken in a traumatized teenager with trust issues and a fear of abandonment. "Sarah, you remember when you first came to live with me?" She'd cut her filet mignon into perfect squares, the same way she'd taught me to do when I was 16 and had no idea how to use a steak knife. "You were so angry. At the world, at God, at your mother for dying." I remembered. I'd been a nightmare for the first 6 months. Screaming at her, breaking things, testing every boundary to see if she'd send me away too. But Margaret had never wavered. She'd held me when I cried, grounded me when I acted out, and somehow convinced me that I was worth saving. "You saved my life," I'd told her that night, meaning every word. That's when her face had changed, softened, become vulnerable in a way I'd rarely seen. "Actually, honey, I need to ask you something. It's embarrassing, but..." She'd looked down at her hands. "I made some bad investments, lost most of my savings. The house might go into foreclosure if I can't catch up on the payments." The same house where she'd taught me to drive in the driveway. Where I'd had my first real Christmas morning after Mom died. Where she'd helped me fill out college applications and held my hand when I was terrified I wouldn't get in anywhere. I'd written her a check for $8,000 that night. Didn't even hesitate. "You don't have to pay me back," I'd said. You gave me everything. This is nothing. She'd cried then. Real tears, I thought. Hugged me so tight I could barely breathe and told me I was the daughter she'd never had but always wanted. For 3 years after that, the requests came sporadically. Always with a story. Always with genuine distress. A medical emergency. Car trouble. The roof needing repairs. Small amounts, 2,000 here, 1,500 there. Nothing that made me question anything except my own budget management. Margaret would visit more often during those years. Sunday dinners became a tradition. She'd bring groceries and cook elaborate meals, telling me stories about Mom that I'd never heard. How they'd been best friends growing up. How Mom had made her promise to take care of me if anything ever happened. Your mother was the better person, she'd say, washing dishes in my tiny apartment kitchen. But I'd like to think I kept my promise to her. When I got pregnant with the twins, Margaret was the first person I called. Their father had vanished the moment I mentioned the word pregnant, and I was terrified of raising them alone. But Margaret drove straight to my apartment and held me while I cried. We'll figure this out together, she'd said. Family takes care of family. She'd been there for the birth. Cut the umbilical cords when my hands were shaking too badly to hold the scissors. Stayed for 2 weeks afterward, sleeping on my couch and getting up for night feedings so I could rest. That's when the amounts started getting bigger. The twins need a good environment, she'd said when they were 6 months old. That apartment complex isn't safe. But I found you a perfect house, 3 bedrooms, good school district. I could co-sign the mortgage, but I'd need to improve my credit score first. If you could help me pay off some debt. $12,000. The biggest check I'd ever written. But she was right about the apartment complex. There'd been 2 break-ins that month, and I was terrified every night. We got the house. The twins had a backyard to play in. I had a real kitchen and space to breathe. Margaret had been right about everything. The pattern established itself over the next few years. Margaret would identify a problem in my life before I even realized it was a problem. Then she'd present a solution that required financial help from me. But the solutions always worked. The house was perfect. The private school she recommended for the twins was excellent. The financial advisor she introduced me to had been phenomenal. I know it seems like I'm always asking you for money, she'd said last Christmas, after I'd written the check for her dental work. But everything I suggest is for your benefit. For the twins' benefit. I'm just trying to build the life for you that your mother would have wanted. Sitting on my bed now, staring at the photographed bank statements in my hands, I realized something that made my chest feel hollow. Every major decision I'd made in the past 8 years had been Margaret's idea first. The house. The twins' school. The neighborhood. My financial advisor. Even my job, she'd been the one who'd encouraged me to apply for the position at the marketing firm where I'd eventually gotten promoted. I walked to my closet and pulled out a shoebox from the top shelf. Inside were all the cards and letters Margaret had written me over the years. Birthday cards, thank you notes, Christmas cards with long, handwritten messages about family and love and gratitude. I spread them out on my bed and read through them with new eyes. The handwriting was perfect. Too perfect. Each letter looked like it had been carefully crafted. And the messages, now that I was looking for it, followed the same pattern. Gratitude. Love. Subtle reminders of everything she'd done for me. Careful mentions of her own struggles. Sarah, watching you with the twins reminds me of how your mother was with you. She would be so proud. I hope I've been able to honor her memory by taking care of you both. The medical bills have been overwhelming this month, but seeing your happiness makes everything worthwhile. Dearest Sarah, your success at work brings me such joy. I know the promotion means you'll be able to provide even better for the twins. I'm struggling with some financial challenges, but knowing you're secure makes my own problems seem small. Every card was a psychological blueprint, a reminder of debt owed, followed by a subtle request for help, wrapped in love and family obligation. I grabbed my laptop and pulled up my bank records for the past 5 years. Transaction by transaction, I started adding up every penny I'd given Margaret. $8,000 for the house payments, $12,000 for her debt consolidation, $4,000 for medical bills, $2,000 for car repairs, $3,000 for the roof, $4,000 for dental work, $1,500 for utilities, $6,000 for her mother's funeral expenses, $3,000 for legal fees. The number that appeared on my calculator made me nauseous. $47,000, $500. In 5 years, I'd given my aunt almost $50,000. Money that had come from my salary, my bonuses, even my savings account that was supposed to be for the twins' college fund. My phone rang. Margaret's ringtone, "Isn't She Lovely" by Stevie Wonder. The same song she'd said reminded her of me when I was 16. I stared at the phone, watching her name flash on the screen. For the first time in 18 years, I didn't answer when Margaret called. The voicemail notification popped up 2 minutes later. I played it immediately. "Hi sweetheart, I wanted to thank you again for considering the loan. I know it's a big ask. I've been thinking, maybe you could just transfer it directly to Dr. Patterson's office? That way you'd know it's going exactly where it should. I can text you the account information. Love you." Dr. Patterson. The family physician who didn't treat cancer and had never heard of Margaret Lawson. She wasn't just lying about being sick. She was stupid enough to think I wouldn't check. I called Margaret back the next morning after dropping the twins at school. My hands were steady, my voice was calm, and I had a plan that felt reasonable and fair: give her one chance to tell me the truth. "Aunt Maggie? It's Sarah. Can you come over this morning? I want to discuss the loan." "Oh wonderful, honey. I knew you'd come through for me. You always do." The confidence in her voice made my stomach turn. She wasn't nervous. She wasn't worried about my overnight consideration. She already knew I'd say yes because I always said yes. "Just come over. We need to talk." An hour later, she sat in the same chair as yesterday, but this time I'd rearranged things. No laptop in sight. No distractions, just the two of us and a conversation that was 18 years overdue. "Before we discuss the money, I want to ask you something." I kept my voice gentle, giving her room to be honest. "Are you really sick?" Margaret's face shifted through surprise, hurt, and then settled into wounded dignity. "Oscar-worthy performance." "Sarah, how can you even ask me that? After everything we've been through together?" "Because I called Dr. Patterson's office yesterday. They've never heard of you." She blinked twice. For just a moment, I saw her recalibrating. Then the tears started, real ones this time, which somehow made it worse. "Oh honey, I was trying to protect you from the worst of it. Dr. Patterson referred me to the oncologist at City Medical. I didn't want you to worry about how serious it was, so I simplified it. Plausible, smooth, delivered with exactly the right amount of shame and maternal protection." "What's the oncologist's name?" "Dr. Mitchell." No hesitation. "Dr. Rebecca Mitchell. She's wonderful, but the treatment she's recommending..." Margaret's voice broke perfectly. "It's experimental. That's why insurance won't cover it." I nodded and pulled out my phone. "Let me call and speak to her office about payment options. Maybe they have a payment plan that would work better than you borrowing from me." "No." The word came out sharp and fast. Margaret caught herself immediately. "I already spoke to them. They require full payment upfront for experimental treatments. It's a liability issue." I googled Dr. Rebecca Mitchell oncologist City Medical while she talked. The search returned exactly nothing. "Aunt Maggie." I turned my phone screen toward her. "There is no Dr. Rebecca Mitchell at City Medical. There's no oncology department at City Medical." Margaret stared at the search results. I watched her face carefully, looking for the moment she'd decide to drop the act and tell me the truth. Instead, she doubled down. "They must have moved her practice. These doctors, they change hospitals all the time. Sarah, I'm dying." Her voice rose with desperation. "I'm literally dying, and you're sitting here interrogating me like I'm some kind of criminal. Then show me the medical records." "What?" "The test results. The diagnosis. The treatment plan. Show me something official that proves you have cancer." Margaret's eyes flashed with anger before she covered it with more tears. "I can't believe you're doing this to me. After I raised you. After I sacrificed everything for you." There it was. The guilt card. The same card she'd been playing for 8 years, and I'd fallen for it every single time. "You didn't sacrifice everything for me, Maggie. I've been adding up what I've given you over the years." I pulled out the notebook where I'd written down every transaction. $47,500. She went very still. "That's not accurate. And even if it was, I've paid you back most of it." When? When did you pay me back?" I flipped through the notebook. I have records of every deposit in my account for the past 5 years. You've never paid me back a single penny. Margaret stood up abruptly and walked to my kitchen window, her back to me. When she spoke, her voice was different. Harder. Money isn't the only way to pay someone back, Sarah. I gave you a home when you had nothing. I gave you a family. I gave you love when you were unlovable. The word hit me like a slap. Unlovable. As if my teenage grief and trauma had been a character flaw instead of a natural response to losing my mother. That was 18 years ago, Maggie. And it doesn't give you the right to lie to me now. She turned around, and the mask was completely off. No tears, no vulnerability, just cold calculation. What exactly are you accusing me of? I'm not accusing you of anything. I'm asking you to tell me the truth. Are you sick or not? Of course I'm sick. I've been dealing with health issues for months. What kind of health issues? Stress, depression, anxiety. She sat back down, and now her voice carried a different kind of manipulation, professional victimhood. Do you know what it's like to watch the only family you have left treat you like a liar? To have the person you raised question your integrity? I felt the familiar tug of guilt, the automatic impulse to apologize and comfort her. But something had changed in me since yesterday. Maybe it was seeing those bank records. Maybe it was realizing how carefully she'd researched my finances. Maybe it was the word unlovable still echoing in my head. Maggie, you came to my house yesterday asking for $5,000 for cancer treatments. Now you're saying you have stress and depression. Those aren't the same thing. The stress is making everything worse. I can't work. I can't function. I need help getting back on my feet. Then get a job. The words came out harder than I'd intended, but I didn't take them back. Margaret's face went cold. A job? Sarah, I'm 62 years old. No one hires women my age. You're 58. And you told me last year that you were taking early retirement by choice. Another lie caught. Another moment where she had to recalibrate her story. I meant voluntary severance. The company was downsizing. I didn't have a choice. I stood up and walked to the window where she'd been standing. My neighbor Julia was in her front yard, watering her flowers, normal life happening while mine was falling apart. Maggie, I've been thinking about something. Julia mentioned that you've been here on weekday mornings when I'm at work. What were you doing here? Checking on the house. Making sure everything was okay. With what key? Silence. I gave you that key for emergencies, not for regular visits when I'm not home. I was worried about break-ins. This neighborhood isn't as safe as you think. I turned back to face her. Someone went through my filing cabinet. Someone photographed my bank statements. Someone called my bank asking about my safe deposit box. Margaret's composure cracked. Just for a second, but I saw it. Fear. Not the performed fear of a woman asking for help. The fear of someone who'd been caught. I would never do that. Then who did? I don't know. Maybe you should be more careful about who you let in your house. The accusation was so ridiculous, so obviously deflective, that I almost laughed. Almost. You're the only person besides me who has a key, Maggie. She gathered her purse and stood up. I don't have to listen to this. I came here asking my family for help during the worst time of my life, and you're treating me like a criminal. Your mother would be ashamed of you. And there it was. The nuclear option. The one thing she knew would destroy me. But this time, it just made me angry. Don't you dare bring my mother into this. She would never have lied to me about being sick. She would never have manipulated me for money. And she sure as hell would never have called me unlovable. Margaret's hand was on the door handle. I think we both need some time to cool off. I think we need some time apart, period. She stopped and looked back at me. What does that mean? It means no more loans, no more emergency visits, no more using my house when I'm not here. If you want to be part of my life and the twins' lives, it has to be honest. No more lies. Margaret's smile was cold and sharp. Sarah, honey, you have no idea what honest looks like. She walked out, leaving me standing in my kitchen with the distinct feeling that I'd just declared war on someone who'd been fighting a battle I didn't even know existed. The call came at 2:47 a.m., 3 days after Margaret walked out of my house with that cold smile. Miss Chen? This is Officer Rodriguez with the County Sheriff's Department. We have your Aunt Margaret Lawson here at the station. She's asking for you to come pick her up. I bolted upright in bed, instantly awake. Is she hurt? What happened? She's fine. She was found wandering around a residential neighborhood about 40 minutes from your location. Homeowner called it in when she saw someone looking into car windows. Your aunt says she was confused, got lost driving to your house. My blood ran cold. Driving to my house at 2:30 in the morning? That's what she told us. She seems disoriented. Maybe you should come get her. I threw on clothes and called my neighbor Julia to come stay with the twins. Margaret had been at the police station for 2 hours, which meant she'd been arrested around midnight. What had she been doing in a neighborhood 40 minutes away, looking into car windows? The sheriff's station was a squat building that smelled like coffee and disinfectant. Officer Rodriguez was young and seemed genuinely concerned about Margaret's welfare. She kept insisting she needed to get to your house, he said, walking me toward the holding area. Said it was an emergency with your children. But when we asked for details, she couldn't give us any specifics. My children. Margaret had used my twins as her excuse for whatever she'd really been doing. Has this happened before? The confusion, I mean? I almost said no automatically, but then I stopped. I don't know. We haven't been speaking much lately. Margaret was sitting on a bench in a small room, looking smaller and more fragile than I'd ever seen her. When she saw me, her face crumpled with relief. Sarah, thank God. I was so worried about Emma and Jake. Emma and Jake. The twins' names were Lily and Max. Aunt Maggie, what were you doing out there? I was coming to check on you. I had a feeling something was wrong. Her voice was shaky, uncertain. I must have gotten turned around. Officer Rodriguez cleared his throat. Ms. Lawson, can you tell me what street your niece lives on? Margaret looked at me with genuine confusion. Maple Street? I lived on Cedar Lane. Had lived there for 6 years. Maggie, what emergency were you talking about? What was wrong with the kids? I had a dream. Something terrible was happening to them. She pressed her hands to her temples. It felt so real. The officer and I exchanged glances. This wasn't the calculated manipulator who'd sat in my kitchen 3 days ago. This was either an Oscar-worthy performance or something was genuinely wrong. I signed the paperwork to take her home and helped her to my car. She was quiet during the drive, staring out the window like she was seeing the landscape for the first time. Maggie, do you remember our conversation the other day? About the money? She turned to look at me, and for a moment her eyes were completely clear, sharp, focused. Of course I remember. You accused me of lying about being sick. The confusion was gone. Just like that. As if someone had flipped a switch. But you just forgot where I live. You forgot my children's names. I was stressed. It was dark. I got disoriented. Her voice was firm now, defensive. Anyone could make that mistake. I pulled into her apartment complex and walked her to her door. The same rundown building she'd been complaining about for years, with peeling paint and broken porch lights. Do you have your keys? She fumbled in her purse, and I heard the jingle of metal. But when she pulled out the key ring, I saw something that made my heart stop. My house key. The one I'd given her for emergencies. It was still there, even though I'd told her 3 days ago that I wanted it back. Maggie, I need that key. What key? My house key. The one in your hand. She looked down at her keys like she'd never seen them before. Oh. Yes. Of course. She worked it off the ring and handed it to me, but her fingers lingered on mine for just a moment. Sarah, you know I love you, don't you? Everything I've ever done has been because I love you. Something in her tone made me look at her more carefully. The confusion was back, but underneath it was something else. Something that felt like an apology. I know, Maggie. Get some sleep. I waited until I heard her deadbolt click before walking back to my car. But instead of leaving, I sat in the parking lot for a few minutes, thinking about what had just happened. Margaret had been arrested for prowling around a neighborhood, claiming she was headed to my house to check on an emergency with children whose names she couldn't remember, on a street where I didn't live. But the moment I'd mentioned our argument, her confusion had vanished completely. My phone buzzed with a text message. Unknown number. You need to know the truth about your aunt. Meet me at Denny's on 5th Street tomorrow at 11 a.m. Come alone. Dr. Patricia Mills. I stared at the message, my hands trembling. Who was Dr. Patricia Mills? How did she get my number? And what truth was she talking about? I typed back, who is this? How do you know me? The response came immediately. I was Margaret's psychologist for 2 years. Till she stopped coming to sessions 6 months ago. There are things about her condition you need to understand. Her psychologist. Margaret had been seeing a psychologist and had never mentioned it. But that would explain the confusion, the memory issues, the strange behavior tonight. What condition? Not over text. This is too important. Please come tomorrow. Your aunt is not well, but not in the way you think. I drove home through empty streets, my mind racing. Margaret had a psychologist who wanted to warn me about something. Margaret had been caught prowling through a neighborhood in the middle of the night. Margaret had confusion that came and went like someone was controlling it with a remote. But Margaret had also perfectly remembered our argument about money and still had my house key despite me asking for it back. When I got home, Julia was asleep on my couch. I covered her with a blanket and went upstairs to check on the twins. Lily and Max were peaceful in their beds, completely unaware that their great-aunt had been arrested while claiming to worry about them. I sat on the edge of Lily's bed and watched her breathe. Whatever was happening with Margaret, whatever Dr. Mills wanted to tell me, I needed to know. Because confused or not, sick or not, Margaret still had access to my life. She still knew where I lived, where my children slept, where I kept my financial documents. And until tonight, she still had my house key. I pulled out my phone and Googled Dr. Patricia Mills, psychologist. Her practice specialized in personality disorders and family trauma. Her bio mentioned extensive experience with manipulation and financial abuse within families. Margaret hadn't just been seeing any psychologist. She'd been seeing someone who specialized in exactly the kind of behavior I'd been accusing her of. The question was, had she been getting treatment for it, or learning how to do it better? Dr. Patricia Mills looked exactly like what I'd expected a psychologist who specialized in family manipulation to look like: sharp gray bob, kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, and the sort of calm presence that probably made people confess their deepest secrets within minutes of sitting down. She was already in a corner booth when I arrived at Denny's, nursing a cup of coffee and looking nervous. Not the confident professional I'd imagined, but someone who seemed genuinely worried about breaking confidentiality rules. Sarah? She stood up when she saw me approaching. Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would. I slid into the booth across from her, studying her face. You said Margaret was your patient. Isn't this illegal? Talking to me about her sessions? Normally, yes. But Margaret signed a release form allowing me to discuss her case with family members if I felt there was imminent danger. Dr. Mills pulled a folder from her briefcase. And after what happened last night with the police, I believe there is. What kind of danger? Dr. Mills opened the folder and spread several documents across the table. I recognized Margaret's handwriting on some of them, the same careful script from all those birthday cards. Your aunt came to me 2.5 years ago. She said she was struggling with depression after losing her job and needed help coping with financial stress. Standard stuff, very common. But during our 3rd session, she mentioned something that raised red flags. She pulled out a yellow legal pad covered in notes. Margaret told me she'd been managing her niece's financial decisions to ensure you made good choices. She was proud of how successfully she'd guided your life, your house, your children's school, your career path. She described it as loving protection. My stomach turned. She was proud of manipulating me? She didn't see it as manipulation. In her mind, she was a benevolent guardian making sure you didn't make the same mistakes your mother had made. But as our sessions continued, a clearer picture emerged. Dr. Mills pulled out another set of notes. Margaret has what we call narcissistic personality disorder with strong sociopathic traits. She's highly intelligent, extremely manipulative, and genuinely believes that other people exist to serve her needs. I stared at the clinical language on the page, trying to process what she was telling me. But she raised me. She took care of me when my mother died. That's what makes her so dangerous. She's capable of performing caring behaviors when they serve her purposes. Taking you in wasn't altruism, Sarah. It was investment. Dr. Mills leaned forward. Margaret told me that she realized when your mother died that you would inherit everything. Your mother had life insurance, a house that was nearly paid off, savings accounts. But you were 16 and traumatized. Margaret saw an opportunity to position herself as your savior so she could gain access to that inheritance. The words hit me like physical blows. That's not, she saved my life. I was falling apart. You were grieving. Normally. But Margaret convinced you that your grief made you broken, that you needed her to function. It's a classic manipulation technique. She pulled out a photocopy of what looked like a bank statement. This is from one of our sessions 8 months ago. Margaret brought this to show me how well she was managing your finances. I looked at the paper and felt the world tilt sideways. It was my bank statement from last year, but it wasn't a copy I'd given her. Someone had accessed my account online and printed this. She had my banking passwords? She had everything, Sarah. Social security number, account information, credit card numbers. She showed me screenshots of your email accounts, your work calendar, even your dating app profiles. Dr. Mills's voice was gentle but firm. Margaret wasn't just borrowing money from you. She was monitoring and controlling every aspect of your financial and personal life. My hands were shaking as I reached for the coffee I'd ordered but forgotten to drink. How long has she been doing this? Based on what she told me, since you turned 18. Maybe longer. Dr. Mills pulled out a thick stack of papers. Margaret kept detailed records of every intervention she made in your life. She was particularly proud of steering you away from a relationship when you were 24 because she didn't think the man was financially stable enough. I remembered that relationship. David, the teacher I'd dated for 6 months before Margaret had started pointing out all his flaws. How he couldn't provide security for me. How he reminded her of my father, who'd abandoned us when I was 3. How I deserved better. I'd broken up with David because I'd trusted Margaret's judgment more than my own feelings. She sabotaged my relationships. She sabotaged anything that threatened her access to you. Jobs that would require you to relocate. Men who might influence your financial decisions. Even friendships with women she thought were too independent. Dr. Mills flipped through her notes. Margaret told me she once spread rumors about a friend of yours named Kelly because Kelly was encouraging you to invest in a retirement account that Margaret couldn't monitor. Kelly. My college roommate who'd suddenly stopped calling when I was 25. I'd assumed we'd just grown apart, but now I remembered the strange conversation where Kelly had asked me why I'd told Margaret that she was trying to get me involved in some kind of financial scam. I'd never said that. But somehow Kelly had heard it from someone. How much money has she taken from me over the years? Dr. Mills hesitated. According to her records, approximately $180,000. The number didn't register at first. It was too big, too impossible. That's not right. I calculated $47,000. That's just what she borrowed directly. But Margaret also had access to your mother's life insurance payout when you turned 18. She was managing your college fund, your first apartment security deposits, even your tax refunds for several years. Dr. Mills pulled out another document. She also took out several credit cards in your name when you were in college. You probably never knew because she made the minimum payments and had the statements sent to her address. I felt like I was falling through space. She stole my identity? She protected your credit rating while using your borrowing power to fund her lifestyle. In her mind, she wasn't stealing. She was managing your resources more efficiently than you could. Dr. Mills closed the folder. Sarah, your aunt is a master manipulator who has been systematically exploiting you for 16 years. The cancer story, the financial emergencies, even taking you in when your mother died, it was all calculated to maintain control over your life and money. The restaurant felt too small, too bright. I couldn't catch my breath. Why are you telling me this now? Why not months ago? Because 6 months ago, Margaret stopped coming to therapy. She said she didn't need my help anymore because she'd solved her financial problems. Dr. Mills's expression was grim. But based on what you told the police officer about your recent confrontation with her, I don't think she's stopped manipulating you. I think she's escalating. I thought about Margaret wandering through that neighborhood at 2 a.m., claiming to worry about children whose names she couldn't remember. The confusion that appeared and disappeared like a magic trick. The memory problems last night, was that real? Possibly. Margaret has been showing signs of what might be early-stage dementia or alcohol-related cognitive decline. But she's also perfectly capable of faking confusion when it serves her purposes. Dr. Mills gathered her papers. The scariest part is that as her cognitive abilities decline, her manipulative behaviors might become more desperate and less controlled. My phone buzzed with a text message. Margaret's number. Sarah honey, I've been thinking about our conversation and I owe you an apology. Can you come over this afternoon? I have something important to show you. I showed the message to Dr. Mills. She read it and frowned. Don't go alone. And whatever you do, don't let her know that we've spoken. Someone with Margaret's personality disorder will become dangerous if they feel cornered or exposed. I stood up on shaky legs. What am I supposed to do? She's the only family I have left. The twins love her. The twins love the performance she puts on for them. But Sarah, this woman has been systematically stealing from you and controlling your life for 16 years. She's not your family. She's your predator. I walked to my car in a daze, Dr. Mills's words echoing in my head. $180,000. Credit cards in my name. Sabotaged relationships. A 16-year con game that had started the day my mother died. But as I sat in the parking lot, something else was crystallizing in my mind. Margaret had made one crucial mistake. She'd kept records, detailed records of everything she'd done, everything she'd taken, every lie she'd told. Records that her psychologist had copies of. Records that could be evidence. And if Margaret really did have something important to show me this afternoon, maybe it was time for me to have something important to show her too. I pulled out my phone and called my bank. Hi, this is Sarah Chen. I need to report suspected identity theft and unauthorized access to my accounts. And I need to speak to someone about opening an investigation into financial fraud. It was time to stop being Margaret's victim. It was time to start being her reckoning. I spent 4 hours at the bank, the police station, and my lawyer's office before driving to Margaret's apartment. By the time I knocked on her door at 3 p.m., I had opened a new bank account, filed a fraud report, changed every password on every account I owned, and documented 16 years' worth of financial manipulation with legal precision. I also had a small recording device in my jacket pocket. Because Dr. Mills had been right about one thing, someone like Margaret would become dangerous when cornered. But she'd also become careless. Sarah, sweetheart. Margaret opened the door with a warm smile that would have fooled me yesterday. Come in. I made tea. Her apartment looked exactly the same as it always had, small, cramped, with furniture that had seen better days. But now I noticed things I'd missed before. The designer handbag on the kitchen counter that cost more than my monthly grocery budget. The new flat-screen TV that was larger than the one in my living room. The stack of mail on her coffee table that I couldn't quite see but seemed to include several credit card offers. You said you had something important to show me. I do. But first, I owe you an apology. Margaret poured tea from a china set I'd never seen before. I've been under so much stress with my health problems that I haven't been thinking clearly. The way I reacted the other day was unfair to you. She handed me a delicate cup painted with tiny roses. The sort of antique china that cost hundreds of dollars per piece. Where did you get this tea set? Oh, it was your mother's. I've been saving it for a special occasion. Margaret sat across from me, her voice soft with manufactured emotion. She always said she wanted you to have it eventually, but I thought you might like to use it here sometimes. For our visits. My mother's china. I'd never seen this set in my life, but Margaret delivered the lie with such gentle conviction that for a moment I almost believed her. That's what you wanted to show me? Mom's china? No, honey. I wanted to show you this. Margaret walked to a small desk in the corner and pulled out a manila folder. I've been keeping track of all the money you've loaned me over the years. I want to make sure we're both clear on the amounts so I can start paying you back properly. She handed me a typed document that looked official and professional. A detailed list of every loan I'd given her, with dates and amounts. The total at the bottom was exactly $47,500. Exactly the number I'd calculated when I'd confronted her. This is very thorough, I said, scanning the document. But I'm confused about something. You have my Christmas loan listed as $4,000. But I wrote you a check for $6,000. Margaret didn't blink. Oh, that's right. I paid $2,000 back to you right after the holidays. Don't you remember? I gave you cash. She was testing me, seeing if I'd accept her revised version of reality. Actually, Aunt Maggie, I have something to show you too. I pulled out my own folder, copies of everything Dr. Mills had shared with me, plus my bank's fraud investigation paperwork. I had an interesting conversation with Dr. Patricia Mills this morning. The change in Margaret's face was subtle but unmistakable. The warm concern disappeared, replaced by cold calculation. I don't know who that is. She was your psychologist for 2.5 years. She showed me copies of her notes from your sessions. I opened the folder and spread the documents across her coffee table, including the detailed records you kept of every way you've manipulated my life since I was 16. Margaret stood up and walked to her kitchen window, her back to me. When she spoke, her voice was different, flatter. Patricia had no right to share privileged information with you. She had every right when she believed there was imminent danger to a family member. I pulled out the bank statements when you accessed my accounts without permission and printed my financial information. I was helping you manage your money. You were making terrible decisions. What? Putting money in savings accounts you couldn't access? Building a college fund for my children that you couldn't monitor? I stood up and joined her at the window. Or were my terrible decisions the relationships you sabotaged and the friendships you destroyed? Margaret turned to face me, and the mask was completely off. No tears, no vulnerability, just cold, predatory intelligence. You have no idea what you're talking about. I saved you from making mistakes that would have ruined your life. You sabotaged my life to maintain control over it. I pulled out the credit report my bank had printed. Did you know I have 3 credit cards I never applied for? All opened when I was in college, all with statements sent to your address. Those were for emergencies. In case you needed them. Those were so you could spend my credit limit while I was too young and trusting to notice. I sat back down and pulled out the recording device, placing it openly on the table between us. I'm recording this conversation, Maggie, for the police report I filed this morning. She stared at the device, and I saw her mind working, calculating, planning her next move. You called the police on me? I reported identity theft, bank fraud, and financial exploitation of a family member. The detective was very interested in the documentation Dr. Mills provided. I kept my voice calm and steady. They're particularly interested in the fact that you've been using my personal information to monitor my accounts for 16 years. Margaret sat back down, and now she looked like someone playing chess who just realized she was 3 moves from checkmate. Sarah, think about what you're doing. I'm the only family you have left. The twins adore me. Do you really want to destroy that over money? This isn't about money, Maggie. It's about the fact that you've been lying to me my entire adult life. I pulled out the psychological evaluation Dr. Mills had included in her file. It's about the fact that you have a personality disorder that makes you incapable of caring about anyone except as a source of money and control. That woman doesn't know me. She's filling your head with psychological garbage to justify her own mistakes. Margaret's voice was rising, becoming sharper. I love you. I raised you. I sacrificed everything for you. You took me in because you wanted access to my mother's life insurance money. You've been systematically stealing from me for 16 years. And you don't love me, Maggie. You love what I can do for you. Margaret stood up abruptly and walked to the kitchen. I heard her opening drawers, and alarm bells started going off in my head. What are you looking for? She came back with a knife. Not threatening me with it, just holding it. Turning it over in her hands. Your mother was just like you, suspicious. Always questioning people who were trying to help her. My blood turned to ice. Put the knife down, Maggie. She had money hidden away that she never told anyone about. Even me. I was her sister, and she didn't trust me with her financial information. Margaret's voice had taken on a strange, dreamy quality. But after she died, I found it. $28,000 in a safe deposit box. The number hit me like a physical blow. $28,000 that should have been part of my inheritance. Money that belonged to me. Money that I used to take care of you. To buy you clothes and food and pay for your school supplies. She was still turning the knife over in her hands. Money that I invested wisely instead of letting you waste it on teenage nonsense. You stole my inheritance and convinced me I should be grateful for it. Margaret looked up at me, and her eyes were completely cold. I did what needed to be done. Just like I'm doing what needs to be done now. She raised the knife, and for a moment I thought she was going to lunge at me. Instead, she pressed it against her own wrist. If you don't drop this police investigation, I'm going to tell them that you threatened me. That you came here angry about money and tried to hurt me. Look how this will look, a disturbed young woman who attacks the aunt who raised her. I stared at her, stunned by the calculated cruelty of it. You're going to hurt yourself and blame me for it? I'm going to do whatever it takes to protect myself, just like I always have. She pressed the knife a little deeper, and I saw a thin line of blood appear. The choice is yours, Sarah. Drop the investigation and go back to being a good niece, or explain to your children why their mother is in prison for assault. I looked at her sitting there, knife against her wrist, threatening to mutilate herself to frame me for a crime. And I realized that this was who Margaret had always been. Not the loving aunt who'd saved me. Not the struggling woman who needed my help. But a predator who would do anything, hurt anyone, including herself, to maintain control. I picked up my recording device and my folder of evidence. Do it. Margaret blinked. What? Cut yourself, call the police. Tell them I threatened you. I walked toward the door. Because that recording device has been running since I sat down, and it captured everything you just said, including your confession to stealing my mother's inheritance. I opened the door and looked back at her. The difference between us as Maggie is that I have evidence. And you just have more lies. I walked out, leaving her sitting there with her knife and her threats and her 16 years of manipulation finally exposed. For the first time in my adult life, I was free. 3 weeks later, I stood in Margaret's apartment again. But this time, I wasn't alone. Detective Harrison from the Financial Crimes Unit was methodically photographing every room while the forensic accountant I'd hired went through boxes of documents that Margaret had been forced to surrender under court order. Margaret herself sat on her couch in handcuffs, no longer bothering with tears or manipulation. The arrest warrant had been executed at 6 a.m., and for the first time since I'd known her, she looked exactly like what she was, a 58-year-old woman who'd built her entire life on lies. Miss Chen, you're going to want to see this. The forensic accountant, a sharp-eyed woman named Lisa Park, was standing beside Margaret's bedroom closet holding what looked like bank statements. But not just any bank statements. She has 12 different accounts under various names. Some using your social security number, some using variations of your mother's information, some using completely false identities. Lisa spread the papers across Margaret's dining table. The total across all accounts is approximately $253,000. I stared at the numbers, my mind struggling to process the scope of Margaret's deception. $250,000. Money that should have been mine, money that should have paid for my children's college, money that should have given us security instead of the constant financial stress I'd lived with for years. How did she get this much? Your mother's life insurance was much larger than you were told. Margaret claimed the full amount as your guardian and told you it was much smaller. Then there's 16 years of systematic identity theft, credit card fraud, and what appears to be investment accounts opened in your name. Lisa pulled out another stack of papers. She also applied for and received several small business loans using your credit profile. Detective Harrison looked up from photographing Margaret's jewelry box. We found something else you need to see. He led me to Margaret's bedroom, where he'd moved the bed away from the wall. Underneath, built into the floor, was a small safe. We opened it with the court order. Take a look. Inside the safe were neat stacks of cash, jewelry that I recognized as my mother's, and a leather journal tied with a ribbon. Detective Harrison handed me the journal. You might want to read this in private. I opened it to the first page and saw my mother's handwriting. For Sarah, on her 18th birthday. My darling girl, if you're reading this, then Margaret has finally given you what I left for you. I know she'll take good care of you until you're old enough to understand these gifts. My hands shook as I read further. The journal contained a complete inventory of everything my mother had left me. The life insurance money, $180,000, not the $30,000 Margaret had claimed. Jewelry worth nearly $40,000. Stock certificates for investments my mother had been making since I was born, now worth over $85,000. My mother had left me enough money to pay for college without debt, to buy a house without struggle, to raise my children without the constant financial stress that had defined my adult life. Margaret had stolen not just my inheritance, but the future my mother had tried to secure for me. There's more, Detective Harrison said gently. Look at the last entry. I flipped to the final page, where my mother had written something in her final weeks. Sarah, I need you to know that I've hidden this journal and the spare safe key where Margaret will never think to look, inside the binding of your old copy of Jane Eyre that you loved so much. If something happens to me before you turn 18, don't trust anyone completely, not even family, until you've read every word in this journal. I love you more than life itself. Protect yourself, my darling girl. Mom, I closed the journal and looked around Margaret's bedroom. She'd had this journal for 16 years. She'd known exactly what my mother wanted me to have, and she'd kept it from me anyway. Miss Chen? Detective Harrison's voice seemed to come from far away. Are you okay? I looked at Margaret through the bedroom doorway. She was watching me with the same cold calculation she'd shown in our final confrontation. No remorse, no shame, just irritation at being caught. I'm perfect. The legal aftermath moved faster than I'd expected. Margaret's public defender advised her to take a plea deal rather than face trial for 16 felony counts of identity theft, fraud, and financial exploitation. She would spend 4 years in prison and be required to make full restitution. The bank accounts were frozen and would be transferred back to me once the paperwork was complete. The cash from under her bed was returned immediately. My credit report was cleaned up, and the fraudulent accounts were closed. But the most important conversation happened on a Tuesday evening, 3 months after Margaret's arrest. Mom, why doesn't Great Aunt Maggie visit anymore? Lily was curled up next to me on the couch, her homework spread across the coffee table. Max was building something elaborate with Legos on the floor, but I could tell he was listening. I'd been dreading this question, rehearsing different ways to explain that someone they'd loved had never really loved them back. Remember how we talked about how sometimes grown-ups make bad choices? Yeah. Well, Aunt Maggie was making some bad choices with money. She was taking money that belonged to us without asking. So she can't visit anymore. Max looked up from his Legos. Yes, like stealing. Lily frowned. But she gave us presents. She did. And I think she cared about you both in her own way. But she also did things that hurt our family. I pulled Lily closer. Sometimes people can care about you and still do things that aren't good for you. Are we in trouble because of the money? No, baby. We're actually going to be okay. Better than okay. I gestured around our living room, the same house I'd been struggling to afford, that now felt secure for the first time since I'd bought it. Aunt Maggie had to give back all the money she took from us. Max abandoned his Legos and climbed up on the couch with us. So we don't have to worry anymore? I thought about the college funds I'd been able to establish for both of them. The mortgage that was now halfway paid off. The savings account that would let me sleep peacefully for the first time in years. No, we don't have to worry anymore. That night, after the twins were asleep, I sat at my kitchen table with my mother's journal open in front of me. I'd read it cover to cover 3 times, learning about the woman who'd loved me enough to plan for every possibility, including the possibility that the family she'd entrusted with my care might betray that trust. My phone rang. Julia from next door. Sarah, I hope you don't mind me calling. I just wanted to say how proud I am of you. What you did took incredible courage. I just did what needed to be done. That's exactly what I mean. You could have kept letting her manipulate you, kept avoiding the truth because it was easier. But you chose to protect yourself and your kids instead. Julia's voice was warm. Your mother would be proud. After I hung up, I walked to my bedroom and pulled out the old copy of Jane Eyre that had been sitting on my bookshelf for 16 years. I ran my fingers along the binding where my mother had hidden the safe key, thinking about the woman who'd loved me enough to leave me breadcrumbs back to the truth. Margaret had been wrong about one thing. My mother hadn't been ungrateful or suspicious. She'd been smart enough to know that love without trust is just manipulation wearing a prettier mask. Smart enough to protect her daughter even from beyond the grave. Smart enough to believe that someday I'd be strong enough to face the truth and choose my own freedom over comfortable lies. I looked out my bedroom window at the quiet street where my children would grow up safe and secure, and I made a promise to the woman who'd given me everything, twice. I would never again mistake someone's need for my resources for their love for my soul. Have you ever discovered that the person you trusted most was the person who understood your weaknesses best?